morning and welcome to a Friday edition of Pot Up with Matthews in the morning from the Crime Prevention Security System Studios. Large enough to serve you, small enough to care. Shane Matthews here. We got a good show lined up for you today. We got Brent from First Coast News over in Jacksonville, also College Sports Today, and a Heisman Trophy voter. Join us, talk the state of college football right now, what's going on. Second part of the program will be joined by former tight end here at the University of Florida, Tate Casey. Has 2 national championship rings and now is the sideline reporter for the Gator Radio Network. Last night, if you missed it, they released the NFL schedule, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with Tom Brady have 5 appearances on national television, primetime. The Raiders get 4 primetime games at home in their new ballpark. So, the game that kicks off the season, week 1, that a lot of people are excited about, obviously, is Tom Brady playing against Drew Brees in New Orleans. But we're going to go to the Titan MRI hotline, and we're going to be joined by our good buddy Brent Beard. Brent, good morning. Welcome to the program. How are you?
Guys, I'm doing well. It's a wonderfully refreshing, cool morning here. Anytime you get a 74-degree day in a upper 40 to lower 50-degree night, should be a state holiday here in Florida.
No doubt about it. Very chilly here as well. Brent, let's jump in. Well, first of all, I know. Do you follow the NFL much?
Some, yes.
What did you think about some of the scheduling things last night? Did you happen to see any of it?
Yeah, well, I read a lot of it on Twitter during that time. It was obvious that they want Kansas City in the spotlight, and they should as often as they do, along with Tom Brady. I think the Dolphins with Tua now have raised a lot of attention and focus, which will be fascinating. I saw the Jaguar schedule. That they get a little bit of a break early, but they're still going to end up maybe winning 4 or 5 games at the most. So, but the thing the NFL does that college needs to do at some point too is they make an event out of that gives the league more publicity, and college football needs to find a way to do events like that and give themselves more publicity.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, let's get into the college football. What are you hearing right now? I know a lot of things are changing daily. Different commissioners having meetings saying, we're not going to allow student athletes back on campus until the regular students are allowed there. So fill us in on what's going on.
I think the biggest thing that's happened, or the commissioners changing their mind about not having to be on campus and maybe going in the direction of online classes. Obviously, this has worked at this point to a degree to where they feel more comfortable with it. Bob Bowlesby, the Big 12 commissioner, who is often quoted nearly daily about this, is saying now that going to class in an online sense is satisfactory. There's room for that to happen. So I think they're more open to that than they were, instead of for sure having to have students on campus. See, these guys talk virtually every day, and the athletic directors do the same thing. So a lot of this shifts back and forth. And I think that's probably a good thing that they're more open to that. I think what's happening is, too, guys, let's be honest about this. I think these commissioners have looked at the numbers, and they know if they don't have football this year, that it could be an economic disaster for some of these schools. So I think they're loosening up their mindset about allowing some things now that they may not have before. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to be reckless with the health of the players. I just think they're more open now to situations like online classes, to where a few months ago, guys, they really weren't.
So Brent, I've also heard that there's some schools that have said, okay, we're pretty much setting this date, hoping our athletes can come back. We're planning on playing football. Then there have been a couple other schools in certain conferences that are like, whoa, hang on a second. So is there a possibility, let's just say for the SEC standpoint, that we have two or three teams, SEC bad example because I think the SEC, all of them are going to play. But let's say in the Big Ten or something, maybe two or three teams are like, we're not going to play until we know for a fact it's safe. But these other teams go ahead and play. How are they going to structure all that, and what's going to happen to those teams that don't play?
That's a great question. I mean, does that mean that they end up forfeiting a game? I mean, yesterday or last night, the governor of Oregon, Tate Brown, comes out and says that large gatherings, including live sporting events with audiences, will not be able to return until we have a reliable treatment or prevention like a vaccine. That's one of the more ridiculous statements I've heard in quite a while as far as the timing with this. Look, you don't make statements like that in May. You give it more time to see what you can do. And the reason I bring that up is you've got a game between Oregon and Ohio State that would be huge as far as national ramifications. And again, a lot of what we have to remember during this time is a lot of your governors and mayors. This is one of the few times some of these folks can be in the limelight nationally, and they're going to take advantage of that, and then hopefully cooler heads will prevail a little bit later on. But directly to your question, Greg Sankey actually kind of discussed this on a radio interview last week on the station here in Jacksonville on 1010XL. That yes, there is a chance that some schools either won't be ready to go or won't be ready to play. Now, should that mean that it would prevent others who are ready to go? And I think what you're hearing now, Shane, is that that's not going to happen. I think your reality is that the schools who can play are going to be able to do that, and will plan on doing that. And if for whatever reason you can't play, that they will. I don't know what they're going to do with that. I mean, that's something they've got to discuss. But just the fact that they're actually bringing that out tells us that they're looking at the scenario that there may be schools that either can't get off the ground in September or may not be able to play the whole season, but yet that is not going to hold others back.
We're speaking with Brent Beard from First Coast News over in Jacksonville, also co-host of College Sports Today. Brent, so I'm not going to ask you if you think the season is going to start. Do you think there's any chance we start on time this year?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I think that's a real possibility. I still go with the same three scenarios that we've discussed before. That it's either going to start on time, or it's going to start in October, or it's going to be in the spring. I think the spring is the least likely now, where maybe 2 weeks ago that it was more likely, according to who you were listening to. So, and again, I think with this new information that the commissioners would be open for to be able to do classes online gives you some new way of looking at this. Now, again, the bottom line is going to be your chancellors and presidents are the ones who will make the final call, but I think they will lean heavily on the commissioners as far as what to do. So, and it will also be, Shane, I think it's also really important here is will there be some kind of time before the normal fall camp begins, for lack of a better word, kind of a mini camp situation where they could get a little bit of practice in as far as conditioning is concerned. I think that's going to be a key component of this too.
So if we do, or if we're fortunate enough to start on time, I read somewhere where the Dolphins were planning on only allowing like 15,000 fans at their home games, spacing them out, what have you. Do you see college football playing without fans if we start on time, or I don't know how you decide out of the season ticket holders who's allowed to come and who's not. Are you hearing anything along those lines?
The ESPN had a fan survey a few days ago and the question was basically is would you watch televised sports if there were no fans in the stands? And they surveyed about 1,000 people, and 65% of them said they were in favor of sports returning even if fans weren't there. So there's so many scenarios with this now. And the athletic directors, one athletic director said in an article that I read that he has turned in about 8 different budgets for this year, some involving fans, some non-involving fans. So I think at this point, everything is again on the table with that. But your point's a good one. I mean, South Carolina talked about this week of social distancing. What would mean that they would hopefully be able to have everyone there, but what would that mean as far as I think they're trying to figure some of that out too at this point. I won't be shocked if at least in September that happens. But Shane, your point's a good one. I mean, if you're a season ticket holder right now, and some of these schools are trying to get their fans obviously to go ahead and send in the money for their tickets, which is really difficult for people. Schools are going to have to be very flexible on the line of trying to figure all this out.
No doubt. We're speaking with Brent Beard. You can follow him on Twitter at Brent Beard. Brent, I know a lot of college coaches. Some of them have taken pay cuts. We talked about Cincinnati got rid of soccer. I saw where FIU just got rid of indoor track. And our good buddy Mike Bianchi wrote a couple of articles about cutting costs in sports. Talk a little bit about that and where the direction of sports may be headed.
Well, I think revenue streams are going to be one of your big topics that's coming down the road on how they can do this. I think now Mike raised some interesting things. Head coaches can only be signed to 2-year contracts. I don't see that happening because a lot of them wouldn't come with that. He also raised the fact of college head coaches must make at least $1 less than the school president. The bottle is open on that one, and you're not going to get the genie back in, frankly. But I think he raised some really good points in as far as regionalizing non-revenue sports. In other words, if you're in a conference, particularly like you're in the Big 12, like West Virginia, why not play your non-revenue sports in your region, in your area, instead of having to go and play teams in Texas? And I think another thing that's going to come through with this is the buyouts for coaches. They're going to be rethinking these things. And one that really makes a heck of a lot of sense along with this too is having football teams stay in hotels the night before home games instead of staying wherever they live. So I think what Mike's bringing up here is that there are going to be a lot of food for thought here that athletic departments need to look at over the next few months after we get a handle on this and know where we're going.
We're speaking with Brent Beard on the Tate hotline from the Crime Prevention Security System Studios. We'll be joined by former Gator tight end Tate Casey in about 15 minutes. Brent, last time we talked to you, and it seems like it's been going on for months now, the old transfer rules. I know the NCAA was going to vote on it. Where we stand with the transfer rules?
We're going to stand still with that right now. The NCAA Board of Directors are recommending now against one-time transfers, and I think was going to be a proposed vote on this right now. Basically, what has happened is the NCAA has said that they are just overwhelmed with everything else. I still think this is probably going to happen. And again, what we're talking about here is giving undergraduate student athletes the right to transfer one time without forcing them to sit out. Shane, I think it still goes on, but at this point, like a lot of things, it may just be delayed at this point, and that's basically what is going on with recruiting. The NCAA will decide whether or not to extend the current recruiting dead period through June the 30th. They meet again on May the 13th, which is in 5 days. Now, there's a slew of commitments, and that's not stopping players from making commitments, but as far as face-to-face meetings, that's on hold right now, and the NCAA will get to that and make that decision on May the 13th. Could be delayed even more than that, but that's what they're looking at.
Let's move around the SEC, get some team notes about, there's not a whole lot going on, but still teams are trying to move forward with a lot of online Zoom meetings, this, that, and the other. What's going on in Tuscaloosa with the Crimson Tide?
I think they're really excited about having the Director of Sports Performance and David Ballou and the Director of Sports Science and Dr. Matt Ray. These guys have worked together for a while. They were at Indiana. And after Scott Cochran, strength and conditioning coach, went to Georgia, there was a opening. So Nick Saban kind of went in a different direction and is incorporating more science. And these guys specialize in developing players. Alabama's had about a 3-year string of a lot of injuries, particularly with defensive players, linebacker, knee injuries, lower body injuries, and they're taking a look at that and see what they can do. And I frankly think this is kind of the wave of the future. You've got guys who are looking at a lot of different perspective of science that's going to help them in preventing injuries and rehabbing injuries and performance. So it's kind of cutting edge stuff, what it sounds like in Alabama.
Yes. So what's going on in Auburn?
Virginia Tech's 4-star Demetrius Davis is a quarterback. He originally committed to Virginia Tech, and he is now decommitted. And then what's thought is Auburn was involved with this before he committed to Virginia Tech, and that he may now look at Auburn at this point. Now, look, the next kid at quarterbacks is a quarterback for Auburn at least the next 2 years. So, but you still got to have, as you know, Shane, you really need to virtually recruit a quarterback a year, and I'm sure this is probably where this is going. So the main point is here, he's decommitted for Virginia Tech, and a lot of speculation that he may end up at Auburn.
Yeah, Florida, has a couple of question marks going into the year, a couple of interior linemen, maybe at linebacker. What are you hearing about what's going on in Gainesville? Obviously, they had one of their recruits from this signing class decided to enter the transfer portal.
Yeah, and I don't think that's anything really unusual. Isaiah Walker is a freshman that has decided to go 6'4", 309 at this point. Now, he would have to sit out 2020 if he decides to go through with that. No real further information on that. I think the other decommitment situation is Brashard Smith. He is from Miami, 3-star all-purpose back. Says he's decommitting and reopening his recruitment, but he also says he loves Florida. I think what happened here, he recruited and decided early, Jane, and then some other schools entered the fray, and it's got him thinking about this. Look, Florida's going to be fine in recruiting, so but people need to step off the edge if you're real worried about this right now. It's just too early to be. I know some Alabama fans are about to go bonkers because they only have basically 3 verbal commitments right now. But again, in this environment we're in at this point, that really doesn't matter. All this stuff is going to shake out. For one reason, I won't be surprised if we do not, and I say do not, I'm not, and this is just speculation here, that we do not have the early signing period, that they may either delay that or just have one signing period in February. So right now, until we see what we're going in recruiting, Shane, I think folks just need to relax about that.
Yeah, last thing for you, Brent, before we let you go. It seems like Tennessee is doing wonders in recruiting somehow through virtual recruiting, I guess. All the hoopla of all these guys, they're flipping. What are you hearing? Jeremy Pruitt, they won some games down the stretch last year, but why are these kids excited about going to Tennessee?
Well, I think that they're looking at Tennessee. They ended well last year. They beat Indiana in the Gator Bowl, and they got some real momentum from that. And I think Jeremy Pruitt's going to end up being a very good football coach, for one. But they've just had, for whatever reason, a slew of commitments. They've had like 7 in the last few days. But again, I get the excitement for this, but he is having to overhaul that whole roster. And look, Georgia and Florida are still going to win the East and battle back and forth to that. Yeah, I still think it's going to be another couple of years before Tennessee is really competitive as they want to be. They're on their way. If you're a Vol fan and you have a right to be decided and excited about that, but I think people need to pump the brakes on this a little bit. The Tennessee's taken over the world because they're not, but they have had a good couple of weeks. I'm going to mention a couple things real quick, Shane. I don't know why no one's really talked about this, but to me, one of the more interesting things and incredible admissions was the Tennessee quarterback, Brian Marr, who, by the way, I was at the Tennessee game last year in the Gainesville, that actually had to come in and play because they were struggling so much at quarterback, actually admitted that he was thinking very seriously in January about committing suicide, and said his mother called him and left a message, and that gave him enough inspiration to continue on, and he has been pretty public about his battle, and people can look that up and read about it. But I thought that was one of the most amazing things I'd read in quite a while, was that he would actually come out and admit that. So I give him a lot of credit. Hopefully he's got his life back on track. I know Chris Winkie, the Chris Winkie from Florida State, who's on that coaching staff there, is giving him a lot of support. So that's certainly one to look up. And Shane, again, one thing to keep your eye on over the next few days, does the SEC have their normal SEC media days? This year it's going to be in Atlanta with the College Football Hall of Fame, or are they going on a virtual online like some of the other conferences have been over the last few days?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next few weeks. Brent, stay safe over there, my man. We appreciate you joining the program, and we'll talk to you soon.
Look forward to it, Shane. Always enjoy it. Take care.
That's Brent Beard from First Coast News and Jacks, also co-host of College Sports Today. Join us on the Tate MRI hotline. We're going to take a time out here. When we come back, we're going to be joined by a former Gator tight end, Tate Casey. You're watching and listening to Pot Up with Matthews in the Morning from the Crime Prevention Security System Studios. We'll be right back.
Time out! Time out! Hey! Time out! Time out! Time out! There we go. Good.
We want to take this moment to thank all our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills.
Let's give them something to cheer for now.
Our Gridiron sponsors are Crime Prevention Security, small enough to serve you, large enough to care. Titan MRI, Gainesville's only locally owned and operated MRI facility. Peachland Dentistry, Gator Nation's #1 choice for dentistry in Port Charlotte and surrounding areas. Area Rug Masters, your #1 choice for rug cleaning. And Pound Her, preferred personal injury attorney.
Are y'all still on lockdown? Where you live in Gainesville?
Our touchdown sponsors are Campus USA Credit Union, Celebration Point Town Center, Tropical Smoothie Cafe, The Keys Grill and Piano Bar, The Digital Mortgage Guy, Adams Ribs, Cloud9 Spa, Gator Dominoes, Celebrate Primary Care, Center State Bank, Gator Bait Media, and Davis Chevrolet.
If you are interested in promoting your business on the show, you can visit our website, potupwithshane.com, and click on the Advertise button or call Freddie Wiebe at 352-284-3733.
Again, thank you for all the great businesses that support the show. Please remember, if you like what we are doing here, thank our sponsors and support the businesses that support us.
He's looking, still looking. He's going for the end zone. He's got a touchdown.
Welcome back to Pot Up with Matthews in the Morning from the Crime Prevention Security System Studios. Large enough to serve you, small enough to care. I want to thank Brent Beard for joining the program. We're now going to go to the Tate MRI hotline, and we're going to be joined by former Gator tight end Tate Casey. Good morning, Tate. Welcome to the show. How are you, bud?
Good morning, guys. Doing great. Appreciate you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to ask all the athletes the first question when they come on my show. You know, first of all, why did you choose the University of Florida? What other schools were recruiting you? And especially you. I mean, you're from the state of Texas. How did the Aggies or the Longhorns let you out of there?
Well, you know, Texas A&M at the time wasn't in a really good spot. I think, you know, the baseball program was probably on the up and coming. Football was a little bit on ice. Texas had a lot to do with Mac Brown and a couple of just dirty recruiting ways, and it didn't put the right taste in my mouth. And honestly, man, you know, LSU and Arkansas and Miami were probably three of the bigger schools that I was looking at. And I'd have to give a lot of credit to Larry Fedora and Ron Zook, you know, for being the big reason that and baseball, you know, the two sport that I was looking at almost everywhere I was interested in at the time. Coach McMahon and Coach Zook really did a good job of appealing to me. So.
Oh, good deal. Well, as you said, you came here. You were a two-sport guy. I don't know. A lot of people don't realize you played baseball here. You got to go to the College World Series too, right?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I didn't get to go. Urban kind of put a halt on that in spring ball freshman year, and that was really where baseball. You know, I hit my branch in the road, if you will. You know, Urban kind of put a good ultimatum on me as a starting tight end my freshman year. I probably played about 25 games or dressed for about 25 games freshman year in baseball, and then went back to spring ball. So after that, everything kind of was football focused from there on out.
So you talked about, you know, Ron Zook is the one that brought you. You played a year under him, under Larry Fedora. Can you give us a comparison of kind of like Zook as a head coach compared to Urban style?
Both really actually aggressive, like, you know, their mannerisms and their intensity level, both similar. You know, I think Urban was almost a little bit more OCD on every single thing, X's and O's, in terms of just it had to be dialed in. And if it was a hair off, you're re-repping it. If the preparation was key, it's boom, 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 boom. I think that Zook was very similar in that aspect, of that regard, but I think that he gave his assistant coaches a little bit more freedom to, hey, you know, keep control of their unit. So, you know, I think Larry Fedora and Coach Loxley had a really good grip on the offense. You know, Coach Strong had a really good grip on the defense. I think Zook gave a lot of freedoms there. Not to say that Urban didn't, but he had a lot more involvement in both units as well, to make sure that every single rep was right where it needed to be.
Yeah, we got a Facebook Live comment here from Buddy. Buddy wants to know, and it's brought to you by Pound Hurt, your preferred business interruption attorneys. He wants to know, Tate, how does your son catch so many great fish?
We've been doing some fishing over here at the Casey house during quarantine, man. I say this, we do a lot of worm fishing. I'm a big fan of Texas rig, so I don't think we stray too far from a weedless hook, and you can get that thing in and out of anywhere. For us, you know, a trick worm or a ribbon tail is pretty on demand. So I think it's about just kind of working with different colors, different baits, and finding your fit, getting used to working it. But it takes some practice, believe me. I keep telling him he's lucky he's hit three or four of the biggest fish he's going to catch his whole life in the last 3 months.
That's awesome. You know, you were on the two national title teams in 06 and 08. Which one of those teams would you say is the better team if they had to play one another?
You know, it's tough because 06 was like just that hard-nosed, almost will to it football team. And we didn't have much other than we had a lot of raw talent. We had a lot of want to, and we had a really good quarterback leading the way. And I think that, without Chris Leak as the leader and the senior that year, the elder upperclassman that year, we don't win a national championship just with Tim Tebow. And the same goes without Tim Tebow. I don't know if we're in that position either, because we had so many moments during the year that, the Tennessee game, 4th and 1, and small moments that we had to overcome to get there. The 08 team was just, it's almost like we knew it. The 08 team before the season even started, even back to the offseason and spring ball, you really couldn't tell us otherwise that we weren't going to win a national championship. And I think that the Ole Miss game woke us up, and we kind of needed that, small moment of humbleness. But yeah, I think just two different types of teams. One was a fast, quick speed team. The other was a really too deep roster on the 06 team with just a bunch of grinders.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about, you as a skill guy, you got Chris Leak and Tebow on the same team, two different type of leaders, I would say. Chris is our all-time leading passer here at the University of Florida, and Tebow is probably the greatest college football player of all time. Just talk a little bit of the how they brought it in the huddle when they were playing in 06.
I think that it was really welcomed. I think, when you look at Chris as a running quarterback and what Urban was trying to bring to UF, I don't think that was necessarily the mesh. And I don't think Chris would argue that either. I think his biggest thing was he was a pocket passer, a pro-style quarterback who could deliver football about as good as anybody in college football. What we didn't really have at the time in 06 was a consistent running back, and especially a short down running back. We had Keystone Moore, eventually that grew into that position as a running back. You just got rid of Deshaun Wynn. So we really had to find that short down back. And I think with Tim being willing and Urban and them having the mindset to say, if we can establish him as a short down runner, what we can create around that from a passing standpoint or other play action passes off of that, i.e. the jump pass and some of these other plays that we kind of spun off that Tebow package, that's really where the foresight was. And I think that Tim really embraced that and Chris embraced that. So that's why it worked.
Speaking of the jump pass, I mean, that's one of the all-time greatest plays in the history of Florida football. And you were a part of that against LSU. Talk a little bit about, what that play call was in the huddle. And did your eyes light up when they signaled that play in?
I wouldn't say they lit up. I know for me, I was waiting on that call for about 3 weeks. We had it installed earlier in the year, and we repped it every single day after practice against, whatever week we were looking at. So at LSU, we repped that against probably 10 different looks on the goal line, red zone. And, of course, we got a look that we didn't rep it against. And hence the timing and everything was a little bit disrupted because of the look that we got. And the release wasn't as clean. The recovery looked disgustingly. It was about as ugly as it could have been. Probably the ugliest 6 I've ever had. But, you take 6 wherever you can get it. And that was one of those plays that just it's amazing to me, the fans that have the retention and where they were that game or where they were sitting that day. And start hearing a lot of the stories around the people that went to the stadium, especially in that south end zone. And I'll hear people that tell me that was my son's first Gator game, and we were sitting, in section blank, row blank, and man, that was the coolest thing we've ever seen. And I've been to 40, games in my whole life, and it's just cool to see, and it's really cool to hear. And obviously, you got to appreciate having at least one play in your bag that everybody remembers.
No doubt. We're speaking with Tate Casey. You can follow him on Twitter at TateCasey84. We have a Facebook Live question here for you, Tate. It's brought to you by Pound Hurt, your preferred business interruption attorneys. Jeff wants to know, should the Gators forgive and embrace Urban?
Oh, 100%. Listen, I get confused by it, and I do understand it. I understand that there's obviously certain people that still have yet to forgive the way that Urban departed the University of Florida. I understand all that, and I see both sides of every story. But I will say that when you have a coach that comes in, and I wish everybody just understood when we say gave it their all, and I mean gave it their all. There's guys that have come in. Steve Spurrier is one of them. He has gave the program everything he's had, and he still does, right? So he's one of those involved in that conversation who has changed and forever put his imprint on Florida football. Urban Meyer has come in not only to Florida football, but college football, and has put his mark on college football as one of the best coaches to probably ever coach this game. And not only that, he has changed the game, to a certain extent with a run pass option, and what he's done for the game of college football that has also made his imprint on college football. So, I think you have a coach who was here for 7 years or whatever it was, 6 years, and has won 2 national championships at your school, who up until that point in 100 years only had one. There's a certain level of respect, whether you don't like the way he departed or this, but from a nature of coaching and what he's done for the program, it obviously has made a huge impact on Florida as we go forward.
Very well said. We got a text here on the Tate text line. It comes from Daryl. He says, Tate, you do an excellent job on the sideline. It's a pleasure to take the radio into the stadium and listen to the broadcast. Speaking of that, so you took over for Brady Ackerman, a good buddy of mine, as a sideline reporter with Mick and Lee. Talk about, how did you get involved with that? Is it something that you always wanted to do?
It's something that when I went on my recruiting trip at Florida, journalism was something I wanted to do. As a guy in high school, I did a lot in high school with just the school news and random stuff. And everybody my age watched ESPN in high school and college. That was like what you had to watch. Mm-hmm. And I kind of really looked up to guys like Stuart Scott and the guys that were, Van Pelt and the guys that do ESPN. But I think once I got in college and realized, okay, what I want to do, I didn't know until after I was done. And I honestly still don't know exactly where my life's leading me in the next 20 years. I just know I enjoy what I do now for a job, and I really enjoy doing the sideline thing. Where that goes, I don't know. I will say that Brady, I used to joke with Brady every time I would go watch a game and I'd be on the sidelines about, hey, when you get done with that job, make sure and tell them, make sure you tell them you know somebody. And we'd laugh and joke about it. And then eventually Brady became a huge advocate and somebody that I relied on to, as I was talking through the process, and I would ask him questions on what they expect, like what are the expectations for this, like how does the scheduling work and everything else. He was a huge part of that. And even by his stature, he left a big set of shoes to fill. So, he's a short guy, but he left some big ones.
Yeah, no doubt. So now, you get to watch some practices, you go in the locker room. Talk about Dan Mullen. He was your offensive coordinator when you played here. How is he the same coach, or is he different now as a head coach compared to when he was the OC?
He's different. I won't say he's different in a lot of ways, but I will say that it's noticeable as a former player to watch how patient he is as a head coach. And he's very, I'm not going to say docile, because he has, believe me, he's still got a streak in him where if he needs to get after somebody, he can get after somebody. But I've noticed that he definitely gives credence to his unit coaches, so his offensive coordinators, defensive coordinator. He does a great job of sitting back, watching how they handle things. And if he needs to, interject or put himself in a position to, take precedent, he will. But as an OC, man, you got to think he was probably my age right now when he got to Florida. And as a 34-year-old, 35-year-old trying to make, if you go to Florida as an offensive coordinator coming from Utah, and you just had a Heisman winner in Alex Smith, and you're trying to make a name for yourself at the University of Florida. I think that he definitely had more of his Energizer Bunny streak where he was yelling, hooping, screaming, doing whatever he had to do to motivate his guys. And now I've noticed that I think he's figured it out, and it's really cool to see because he's figured out that he doesn't have to yell and scream and do all that to get across his point and to motivate his guys. And it's kind of cool to see how his guys have responded to him, because you get these different personalities in college football. And I think everybody's come across the different ones. Urban was, I'll tell you right, if you got it wrong, you didn't want to cross Urban. You didn't want to hear what he had to say about it. And you honestly didn't ever want to do wrong to avoid that conversation. I think there's some coaches like that. There's other coaches that can get that same fear out of you without ever having to scream directly in your face from 5 feet away either. So he's done a great job of finessing it. I think as a head coach, I've loved to see how he's evolved in college football as a coach.
Yeah. Talk about the tight end position a little bit. That's kind of a position that's kind of gone away, it seems like, in college football. But it seems like Dan, with yourself and Hernandez and now I mean, Kyle Pitts is a mismatch. Talk a little bit about how he likes to utilize the tight end and your thoughts on Kyle Pitts.
It's really cool to see when Urban came in, it wasn't perfect. It was almost some friends of mine probably would have called it a death sentence at the time. Like, why would you stay at Florida? Because this guy coming in doesn't use tight end, and he's a 5-wide system. He wants to bring the spread offense to the SEC. And to be honest with you, I easily probably could have done that. The problem was I kind of saw what we had at Florida. I kind of knew the direction the program was headed. And I truly believed after a couple conversations with Urban that he wanted that involvement with the tight end. And remember they had a guy named Ben Moa at Utah that was a kind of an H-back tight end. He was a little bit more bulky, bigger than I was a receiving tight end. But I wanted to be that guy who you could put anywhere on the field without having to take off at times just because I was a tight end. And so fortunately and unfortunately, I was at the beginning of this evolution for the position in this offense. That peak position is very integral part of the offense. And I think me and Billy Latsko were the first generation of that. And then as that kind of evolved over time, you run into the Aaron Hernandez's and then the Cornelius Ingrams, and then it has gone to the Jordan Reeds and everywhere else. Now you see with Kyle Pitts, and I will tell you, this kid is something special. He's kind of shown that he can be something special. I think he's got a year or two, depending on what he does, but he's definitely got a huge year in front of him this year.
Yeah,
that tight end position will be the key part of this offense in the next 4 years, in my opinion. And as long as you can recruit the receivers to go along with that package, I think we'll be just fine. And the question just becomes do you keep your coaching force intact? As you start winning 11, 12, 13 games, that's when you start seeing those assistant coaches depart, and you got to find guys that can come in and recruit the same style players that fit your offense.
Yeah. Talk about a little bit, I'm interested now being the sideline guy. You get to hang out in the stadiums. You and Cardozo are outside the stadium doing, the pregame and postgame show. Do you have a favorite venue on the road so far in your 2 years?
We've been to some, we've been to some good places and some not so. I mean, I can't stand Starkville, and it's not against the city of Starkville. I think it's more logistics in and out of there, right? Because of getting to an airport that's 3 hours away, and then if you want to get home, on Sunday, you're leaving the hotel at 2 a.m. to get out of there at 5 so you can get home and have more time with the family. I was really impressed by Columbia, South Carolina this past year in terms of just went out and had dinner after the game, stayed there on Saturday night, and didn't realize the city was what it was. Because usually when we go there for games, it's, you're in the night before, you go straight to the hotel, you don't see anything. Right. You go to the game, you play, and then you're straight back to the airport, and you're in Gainesville before, Grog House opens up for quarter beer night. So it's one of those things that you don't really get a chance to appreciate those cities unless you're traveling to go there. Knoxville's always a good one. It's just a shame that they had to put such a terrible color in a great city like that. And that's always a good city, but university can go somewhere else.
Yeah, we got a Facebook Live here question for you brought through Pound Hurt, your preferred business interruption attorneys. Jeff wants to know, Tate, can you give us a good urban story?
A good urban story. Man, I wish I would have had time to think about that. Good urban story. Trying to think of one that I can tell.
It's PG.
The problem is a lot. You know how it is better than anybody. A lot of these you start thinking about in your head is the ones that come to mind are the ones you don't want to put out on the airwaves. I'm trying to think of a good. I'm trying to give you your money's worth here, but I may have to take a rain check on that for another day, so I can actually think of a good one to give you.
No problem at all. All right, so let's jump ahead to this past year. As you're close to the program, your thoughts on what Kyle Trask did relieving Felipe Franks?
Yeah, I think listen. I was one of those guys who thought Felipe Franks could be your starter for the year and would have gone, won you 9-10 games possibly, assuming you played well on offense. I think what Kyle Trask stepped in and was able to accomplish last year was short of nothing but unbelievable. mind you, you heard Dan Mullen the year before. You knew a little bit about Kyle Trask and how he prepared and his approach to the game off the field when he wasn't even playing. I think that was why he had so much success on the field. His mental reps, and Dan Mullen had spoke about that last year, was he's one of those guys that when he's not on the field, he's taking mental reps. And when he's in the film room, he's trying to understand more, and he's playing it in his head so that if his number's called, he can step in and make the plays. And, you had a young Emory Jones who also was probably a guy who could have stepped in and won you quite a few games last year. But, to step in and win, won the Kentucky game in the position we were in the third quarter, and then come back and say, okay, I've got to be the leader for the rest of the year right now. Felipe's not coming back. It's either on me or the freshman. I thought he took control of that. His poise and demeanor was about unmatched last year in the SEC.
Yeah, I agree. So when you look at this team with all the guys coming back, and hopefully we have a regular season, I really think we have a chance with our schedule to be one of the teams in the talk for the 14 playoff. Do you agree with that?
I 100%. I think if there's a year that lines up, it's definitely 2020. But right, wrong, or indifferent, whatever critics think that's BS or whatnot. I mean, we're not the only team that's ever had a schedule that's questionably and not easy because it's the SEC, but at the same time, it's not what we've seen in the last 10, 15 years with our SEC matchups. So, 21 is going to be a tough road to hoe. I look at the schedule for 21. The SEC slate is what you typically get in October, November. But next year, man, we've got an opportunity to get LSU at home. I think your biggest, hurdles are going to be an FSU team that's a little bit re-energized on the road. And then you also have a Tennessee team, which right now is pulling a lot of strings in recruiting and remains to be seen what exactly that's going to look like. So
we got another Facebook Live question here brought to you by Pound Hurt, your preferred business interruption attorneys. Jeff wants to know, is the offense different as Mullen when he was an offensive coordinator compared to Mullen as a head coach?
No, I think it's evolved a little bit. I mean, the one thing you really didn't see too much run pass option, back in 08, 06. We didn't really, besides maybe a swing route out to the boundary or something like that, was really to throw defenders off more than it was an option. But I'm not going to say it's the same. It's evolved a little bit with some of the schemes and blocking schemes. But, I think that when you have guys like Billy Gonzalez, Dan Mullen, and John Hevesy, and the fact that all three of those guys have been together for as long as they have, or at least know each other well enough to understand how you can tweak certain things and start to get creative. And, the brainstorming sessions as a coach, sometimes you start to understand how you can throw a defense off by, utilizing the same thing, doing the same plays, but how can we approach this play different from a blocking standpoint, or what can we do with the receivers? Where can we set people up to kind of throw a defense off? I think that's what you get with them, but I don't think it's too far off. It's evolved as much as the game has, but I don't think it's any different than really what it was in 06, 08.
We got a text here from Susan on the Titan MR text line. She wants to know, Tate, what teammates from the national title teams do you stay in contact with the most?
Quite a bit. I'll routinely hit guys up just to see how they're doing, how the family's doing. I talked to, let's see, if I was going to, Drew Miller, Steve Rissler, Butch Rowley, James Smith, and Joe Cohen I've talked to a couple times, Major Wright, Ahmad Black. And the guys, a lot of the guys that I see, maybe if I'm on a sideline covering a game and I'll see all the players that do come back for that weekend, a lot of times I'll try and get their number and just make sure that we connect and check in on them every once in a while. It's hit or miss. As well as I do, Shane, the hardest part is keeping in touch with former guys, because once everybody leaves, it's tough. You start, somebody gets married, then they start having kids, and it's like a black hole for 7-8 years. And then, when their kids are in elementary school, you finally hear from them again. They're alive. So, it's kind of just trying to keep constant contact. But those are the guys I talk to probably the most. And, I see guys here and there. I'll hit them up on Facebook or something like that just to check in on them.
Well, now that Urban's not coaching, he needs to do what Coach Spurrier did with all his teams, have a reunion during the summertime.
Yeah, and I think that's really, man, it's a smart thing. The hardest part for Urban for me is how you manage, if you were to do that, how you manage between, Obviously Ohio State and with Florida, you could do it, easily, but you also have won national titles at both, and you've got teams at both that were great teams that probably want to get back together. So maybe it'll occupy his whole summer. It gives him something to do, right?
Yeah, no doubt. We got one last comment or question on Facebook Live brought to you by Pound Hurt, your preferred business interruption attorneys. Reginald wants to know, and I don't know if this is possible, who would you compare Percy Harvin to as a freshman to anyone on the Gators roster?
No one.
Yeah.
No. No, Reginald, no one. And honestly, I hate to say it, as much as we try and hear people draw comparison to Percy Harvin, and I think we kind of shot ourselves in the foot a couple years back when we had DuBose. That was the instant first comparison that you heard about Andre DuBose was he was the next Percy Harvin. And no knock on DuBose, because I think he could have been a little bit better than what we ended up getting out of him, but he was a great athlete. Percy is a once in a 50-year talent, in my opinion. I don't think that, and that may be even shorten it. It may be a once in a century type guy in terms of the linear movement without losing speed, in terms of his field vision for a guy who could be a wide receiver, who could be a running back and a return man. I don't know if we'll see another one for a long time.
Yeah, he's the most dynamic guy I've ever seen with the ball in his hands as a Florida Gator.
And mind you, like I said, the 08 team had speed. We had Demps, we had Rainey, we had a lot of speed. Riley Cooper, we had plenty of speed. It was it was unmatched what he could do with the ball in his hands in terms of putting that speed together with linear movement and vision. And there's yet to be somebody I've seen that does it as good.
Last thing for you, Tate, let everybody know what you got going on now, how old your kids are, all that good stuff.
Yeah, man. So I'm living up in North Florida here in Jacksonville, St. Augustine area, and the kids are 7 and 4 now. So I'm feeling a little bit older as every day goes by, and been married for 8 years, and that's it. We're Florida residents now, and golf year round. That's what we look forward to.
Now, are they playing any kind of sports, your youngins?
So Coog was playing baseball until the coronavirus stuff hit. Playing football that he just finished up before that, and then we're trying to see if we can work our way towards basketball this year, maybe next year. So we'll see how. But us tall genetics, it takes a little while to let that lanky body build in basketball.
Right. Well, good deal, man. Hey, we appreciate you taking your time. You and your family stay safe, and good luck. Hopefully, we'll be seeing you on the sidelines here pretty soon.
Sounds great, guys. I appreciate y'all having me. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, that's Tate Casey joining us on the Titan MR hotline, and does a tremendous job on the Gator Radio Network. Was a great player, and he's part of one of the greatest plays in Florida football history, the jump pass against the LSU Tigers. I just want to give you a rundown of what we got going on next week's program. On Monday, we're going to have Brittany Wagner. She's the star from the Netflix series Last Chance U. And Bo Bounds, who has his own talk show in Jackson, Mississippi, going to be talking Ole Miss and Mississippi State football. On Tuesday, we're going to have Buddy Martin and Ahmad Black. On Wednesday, Tony George and Mike Bianchi. On Thursday, my man Jackie Spreads, who's brought to you by Peachland Dentistry, is going to have Dayton head basketball coach Anthony Grant. And then we're going to close next week with Major Wright, talking about his new book called Major Pain, and Scott Carter from FloridaGators.com. That's pretty much going to be a wrap on today's show. We hope you have a good weekend, and we'll be right back here on Monday. Stay safe, folks, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.